we will open the doors of the new Austin Metropolitan Ministries that seeks to address the critical human needs of the greater Austin area. Before we get too far ahead, let's take a brief look at some of the Austin history. Austin has long been known as a caring community, and in 1941, October, the leadership by the minister, the name of John Barclay, the Austin Area Conference of Churches came into existence. It was initially supported by 12 local church communities representing Episcopal, Lutheran, Methodist, Christian, and Presbyterian faith traditions. Today it's grown to over 120 churches and ecumenical organizations. The conference has solved many needs of the community over these years. The chaplaincies at Brackenridge Hospital, the county jails, and Gardner House are due in part or totally to the conference efforts and funding. The younger of the two organizations is the United Urban Council of Austin, which began in '75. It was the confluence of the action support ministries of 4 groups or churches. This included the Austin District of the United Methodist Church, the Urban Council, the Presbyterian Church of the U.S., and the United Presbyterian Church. This joint venture, which really solidified with research, reflection, direct services, advocacy, and community self-development to establish a clear identity. It changed its name to Metro Ministries of Austin. One doesn't go far without hearing about one of the outreaches of the Capital Food Bank to extend a care from Family Emergency Fund to the Meals on Wheels and many others. With this as a backdrop, I'd like to have you meet the panel today. Fran Briggs, member of the Congregational United Church of Christ, part-time employee, a treasurer of the Metro Ministries, and a member of the board of the new Austin Metropolitan Ministries. Roy Kimball, member of Highland Park Baptist Church, chairman of the Church and Society Division of the Austin Conference of Churches, and vice president of the new Metropolitan Ministries. And last but not least, Pat Flood, married, father of 2 children, the new executive director of the Austin Metropolitan Ministries organization. He spent the last several years in Milwaukee as the director of an ecumenical organization. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're certainly very happy to have you here today. Pat, it's a pleasure and appreciate your taking time from your schedule to be with us particularly.
Thank you for inviting me, Roy. Very happy to be here.
Pat, there's been a lot happening in your life, and you've been involved in this kind of ministry in the Milwaukee area. What's been going on with you over the last, 7, 8 years that you've been involved with the interfaith group there?
Yes, I became director in 1981. It used to be called the Greater Milwaukee Conference on Religion and Urban Affairs. And during that 8 years, or in 1987, we changed it to the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee.
What are the principal concerns of that conference right now that you see?
Well, the Milwaukee area, and it would cover the southeastern corner of Wisconsin, if you have some idea, which is primarily the main population area of the state of Wisconsin and the industrial area, has a very good ecumenical atmosphere. So what the organization really represents are 11 denominations, or rather, that's the wrong term, judicatories, or faith groups. The Jewish community, the mainline Protestant community, and the Roman Catholic community, the Unitarians and the Quakers, all came together about 20 years ago, and the denominational executive, or the executive of those judicatories, automatically served by bylaws on the board of this organization. And so it's basically a judicatory organization, an organization of organizations, addressing the public policy needs within the Milwaukee area.
And the effectiveness was measured, I assume, by the needs that could be addressed and with a minimum amount of overlap.
That's right. There is a tremendous cooperative spirit. For instance, if I would call the denominational executives to a meeting, it's not my call, it's the cooperation and the spirit in the area. They would come. They would see themselves as playing a very real role in the decision-making process from a value perspective of the quality of life issues within that area.
What were some of the things that you were more currently have been addressing?
Well, this organization started the first HMO in Wisconsin.
Really?
Yeah,
okay.
that was started, about 15 years ago, one of the very first in the concept. Another organization that spun off from that is called the Interfaith Program for the Elderly. That currently is an organization of about $1 million budget. It's independent from our organization, but it was formed, the idea was put together, and we sponsored it. Basically what that does is work with clusters of congregations, about, I think there's 12 clusters now throughout the whole metropolitan area, dealing with elderly who live within their homes. They would have an employment program for people over 55. They would have a nursing home program, the whole direct service program in solidifying the congregations to respond.
That's fascinating, really.
It is. It was one of the models. Of course, everyone claims a model. It was one of the early models in responding to the programs of the elderly from a community-based, congregationally based standpoint.
So you really facilitated this other organization coming into being.
That's correct, yes.
And got it on its feet, so to speak.
And spun it off. And so that I think there are similar activities in the Austin area that have been done in the past, meaning by that community development projects where you assist and advocate for the establishment of a program, and then resource it until it can be independent, and then would move out. Well, that would be one of our more successful programs.
Where are you from, Pat? I'm sure that the audience really doesn't have much feel about that.
Well, I'm a country boy. I'm from Eden, Wisconsin, E-D-E-N. If you're a baseball fan, and the Milwaukee Brewers, that's where several of the Brewers came from the small town. Jimmy Gantner, the third baseman.
Okay.
It was a town of 240 people when I grew up, and now it has grown to the metropolis of 500.
Whereabouts is that in the state of Wisconsin?
60 miles north of Milwaukee. But I've spent the last 30 years within the metropolitan area of Milwaukee, and worked in many variety areas of ministry during that time.
Good. And in that variety of ministry, the interfaith is obviously not your first encounter with this kind of ministry.
That's correct.
And where did it begin?
Well, I was an ordained Roman Catholic priest in 1960 for the Diocese of Milwaukee.
Okay.
So I served in a urban congregation for 5 years, from 60 to 65. Went on and got a degree in urban affairs and did further graduate study, and became the director of the urban office for the diocese, the Catholic diocese or archdiocese, from 67 to 75. I also spent a year in Chicago doing field work, working within community areas and poverty communities during that time.
So this has really been in your blood for the last
time.
25 or 30 years, it sounds like. This is not something that just happened to begin.
I was very fortunate to, at the time of the establishment of the National Campaign for Human Development, which is the national program of the Roman Church. I was one of the founders of that in 1969, and been in on some of those ground floors of trying to address the causes of our social ills, and to try to promote empowerment of peoples to remedy those problems.
think we're very fortunate in that to be able to, to have had you be identified as a possible candidate, let alone to be selected as the candidate with that kind of a background. You bring a lot of special yeast, I think, to our community, and give you a chance to get here and to ferment and to find out what's going on. What are your plans, personal plans? You and your wife and your children, when do you think you're going to be able to join us here in the Hill Country?
Well, I will join you for sure in the Hill Country February 1st, or the beginning of February. We tried to come earlier, but due to the withdrawal of being the director of the Interfaith Conference, which is involved in many current programs there, I really need that time to withdraw. Secondly, I have to sell a house, and I also have to purchase a house, and we have two great children, 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, who would like to move the 5th grade and 3rd grade of Milwaukee to Austin, or we remain in Milwaukee. So those are some of those transition points that we have to deal with. And my
wife, are real, really real ones. I appreciate that. We have, over the years with IBM, we have moved some 13 or 14 times. We have 2 children also, and it's tragic almost what happens in families as you pick up and move again and have to sink your roots in and say, is this going to be another transition, or is this for real? And we had to treat each one of them as if it was we were going to remain there the rest of our lives. And it's I think the only way for happiness and to become involved in the community. But the idea of Austin Metropolitan Ministries just didn't happen. It seems to me that it's been some time in the making. Roy, do you have any insight about how long it's been in the making?
Dick, in 1986, a group of committed individuals met and discussed the possibility of merging together 2 organizations to be a broader religious expression of their faith in our community. Out of that meeting came a organizing committee that functioned to look and explore the possibilities. As we explored those possibilities, it became evident to us that in order to be a truly broader expression of our religious faith, that we needed to include those of other faith orders. So hence the interfaith aspect of Austin Metropolitan Ministries was born.
So feasibility, based upon the early coming together between Metro Ministries and the Austin Area Conference of Churches, seemed to be established from the comment that you're relatively early on. And then it became a matter of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, putting the words to the paper and to begin to structure an organization that could potentially fill the concerns and the needs of both of those organizations as they gave up themselves into a broader and a somewhat tougher assignment, which is to encompass both of those missions. Fran, as you see what's going on, and what is your vision as you see that unfolding about the things that Metro Ministries are doing today, and as a board member of, I'm going to use the abbreviation AMM, how do you see those ministries being continued?
Well, I think there is a strong commitment on the part of our board to continue doing what both organizations have been doing in the past, But I think that we also want to expand our ministry, and we feel we can because we're going to be stronger. We'll be a stronger presence because we're interfaith and because we will encompass more people if we're all together in one organization.
You have no difficulty with me in that regard either, but you said encompass more traditions. What are some of those traditions that were not traditionally represented in
well, both Austin Area Conference and Metro Ministries were Christian organizations. And so by forming a new group, we have been able to include the Jewish congregations, an Islamic group, the Mormon Church, and some of those faiths that were not just Christian. So I think we're speaking to the whole religious community in a way that we haven't in the past.
It's an interesting way to unify that whole community, and with that single organization to potentially provide a direction that hasn't been possible in the past. And I'm hoping that, and I think we all are, that Austin Metropolitan Ministries will touch each of our congregations in the greater Austin area, and that they will become involved because we have a single purpose to address those critical human needs. And with that as the call, I would hope that all of them would respond in that same kind of way. And that, how do you see, Roy, that from a conference of churches standpoint going into the future now? You as a chair of one of the divisions of the Conference of Churches have done some things, been involved in that chair activities, and you said, I'm going to move on, assume a greater responsibility, look at other things, and assume the vice presidency of this board activity.
Very early on, there was a strong commitment on the people who gathered to make up Austin Metropolitan Ministries to continue those ministries of Metro Ministries, which is involved issues such as hunger, housing, and the elderly. The chaplaincy program that the Austin Area Conference of Churches has provided for many years is to be continued in its present form, and strong commitment in that area and that need of Austin. We hope that we can continue these ministries that these two groups bring together in their heritage and tradition. We hope that we can be responsive in a broader way to the social needs and the coming together of these two groups, that we can affect policy issues at the city level that can provide the solutions to some of those needs that exist.
Okay, so that we identify some needs, but maybe we haven't really described what the Austin Metropolitan Ministry organization is. How is it structured? Because there's Metropolitan Ministries, Metro Ministries has a structure, Conference of Church has a structure, but the two of you coming together saw a need for a rather unique structure. And can you lay that out a little bit for us?
Dick, we have the assembly, which will be made up of two representatives from each of the congregational members of Metropolitan Ministries. Then we will have a 15-member board. Our board has already displayed their willingness to work very, very hard, and they will be a very active group. This will be the core group that sees to the administrative functionings that Pat will be reporting to in his responsibilities.
Is this the board then that did the search, that that Pat responded to?
Yes.
Okay.
We had a number of very, very fine applications for this position, and it was through very diligent, some 27 hours of interviews that took place that we arrived at Pat Flood.
Okay. Okay, so there is a board, there is an assembly, there's an executive director, and now how do these relate to the outstanding needs that have been identified?
Okay. As I mentioned, the task forces that were created by Metro Ministries and the divisions that were created by the Conference of Churches will in one fashion or the other continue to function to address social concerns, peace, hunger, the elderly. Those will continue to function.
Those models then are still in place and will be functioning then through the foreseeable future.
They are still in place and indeed expanded to include Jewish representation as well as Muslim representation in those task forces to get those faith orders involved.
And then it'll go through a process what? Similar to what? United Way in trying to understand in AMM's own way of doing things how it wants to respond or how it can respond.
There will be some areas that we will choose to respond with our support, with advocacy, with financial resources. There'll be other ways, other issues that we will feel a call to directly be involved in the delivery of those services.
Okay. As we begin to wind up, Fran, help me, what's your vision as you see this new organization emerging? There's probably some heartfelt thoughts about Metro as it exists because of its accomplishments today. But what's your vision for AMM?
Well, I think that it's encouraging that we can all come together and work together.
I think that's beautiful.
It's one of the things that I think we're all very glad about because we can learn to understand the way that others work and the way that they think and the way that they worship. But then we can also continue to do the kinds of services that we've done in the past and perhaps be more effective if we're all working together at that.
Okay. Roy, what about yours vision?
A most exciting aspect about Austin Metropolitan Ministries has been the interfaith aspect of it. Getting to know those of other faiths, getting to know their faith better, getting to know our own faith better has been a strong plus. And we hope with the coming together of the variety of faith orders in Austin that we can say a word about openness, about unity within the diversity in our community.
Pat, you've had some 25 or 30 years experience. You're no novice. But but I think from that experience and from the brief look that you've had at us, what kind of a vision do you see? I know things can't be precise at this point in time, but there is on the horizon, how do you see AMM unfolding in the future?
First of all, I do not want to prophesy to a people who have been involved. That's one thing I've learned in my 30 years. The second thing, though, that the roles of involvement of the religious community in ministry could, in some ways, you can use various categories, but could be put into three categories: service, advocacy, and empowerment. And there are many ways for us to be involved. And that, secondly, the Austin area reflects a cooperative relationship between congregations as well as judicatories. And I think all that is going to be focused in on the big question of the future. What is the role of the church within our society, the role of the faith community, the role of the synagogue, the role of the mosque? Where are the values reflected in the decision-making of the politics and the economics of our society? And I think that's what we face.
That sounds exciting, you know, to be able to integrate those things and raise almost the level of that ministry about what we see. It is beyond just caring, but it addresses values. As we draw to a close today, I really want to thank Pat, Roy, and Fran, and our viewing audience for exploring with us the Austin's new ecumenical organization, Austin Metropolitan Ministries, as well as welcoming this to the community, the new Executive Director, Pat Flood. I'd offer and to extend to each of you and your congregations an opportunity to labor together in this vineyard that we have here of the greater Austin area. A very happy and most blessed New Year. Please join us next week for a continuation of the Austin Faith Dialogue. Thank you.
For more information